The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Saskatchewan Pulse Growers and Nodulator XL.
We're talking about seed quality, and this year with acres being up, seed sources, seed supplies could be tight, and producers may be thinking about pulling seed out of the bin. Sarah, obviously quality is something to consider when putting that seed into the ground this spring.
Yes, you're right. I think with there being a shortage of certified seed this year, there will be acres of lentils and peas put down with probably farm-saved, home-run, bin-saved seed. And I think it's important, I think in terms of their first line of defense, they need to get a germination done, and then after that a disease profile, and possibly a vigor. But very, very important that testing be conducted, and I think people tend to forget that they should be testing when it's not certified seed. So obviously with certified seed it comes tested already, but as you say, there's a definite shortage.
So certified seed if you can, and then if you're taking from the bin, make sure to get a test done.
Absolutely, and there are quite a number of labs across the prairies that all offer good germination, accredited germination tests on lentils and peas, chickpeas, soybeans, any of the pulses essentially.
So you've brought some samples with, why don't we take a look?
Absolutely. So here we have a good germination. So this is a lentil, and it's had an accredited test done on it, and this is when we would assess it at the final count. And you can see here there's a few that actually haven't germinated, but overall this doesn't actually represent the entire sample. There would be 200 seeds tested, so this is just one of the reps, it's of 4. And so here you have a few. So the germination on this is probably going to end up around 85 to 90%, which is excellent for lentils. And what we recommend, regardless of how good the germination is, for the client to consider having a fungal screen. And so once we've established that they want to continue on with a few more tests just to establish the true quality profile of that seed, they'll start with a fungal screen. And so this is the same sample here, and it's on a PDA, so potato dextrose agar plate. And because it is good quality seed, there actually isn't any fungal infection or pathogens on here to speak of. And again, this one plate represents 10 plates, so there'd be, I beg your pardon, 20 plates. So we would have 200 seeds in this particular profile. So by comparison, this one is actually bin run. So this has been sitting around for probably a couple of years. And this, I'm just going to open it up so you don't get a glare. But this, by comparison, in my opinion, is what I always say a dog's breakfast. And we have a number of different pathogens that are affecting this seed sample. So obviously, some serious issues to consider here. And if we just go over to this plate here, or over to this blotter here, this is actually the corresponding germination. So you can see all of these colors here, these colored colonies, they represent various different pathogens that are on this seed. So lentil is generally plagued with seed-borne ascochyta and anthracnose, and these pinkish areas would indicate that there's some fusarium on here. Now, obviously, there's some real issues with this, and the germination is going to be extremely low. And in this case, given that we've got this, we wouldn't recommend treating this sample, but I've just done this so that you can see how it actually does help with the pathogens. So there's not nearly as much infection on here. It hasn't improved the germination, but it has controlled some of the pathogens. So it's very, very important that you start here and that you're targeting a germination, whether it's certified seed or bin run seed, of 80% or better.
So here we have some pea samples, kind of showing the same thing with peas.
Yes. Again, start with a good germination of 80% or better. Always conducted in an accredited seed testing laboratory. Obviously, don't do this at home. I caution that because as we go through these other plates and blotters, I'll explain why, because there's some symptoms that actually are hidden and only experienced analysts can actually speak to and identify. So here we've got an example of a good germination, and for the most part, all the essential structures are here. We've got a good long primary root with secondary roots and root hairs, and a good plumule and a good shoot that's intact. And so we're targeting, and we're well on track here for an excellent germination. There doesn't appear to be anything really wrong with this. So again, I caution, even if you do have good seed and the quality is there and there aren't any pathogens, it's always a good idea to treat. So we have treated this one up, and essentially you can see that all the seedlings in there are very healthy and they're doing very well. And the reason for that is that there may not be pathogens present on the seed, but there's always pathogens present in the soil. And so we're dealing with things like Rhizoctonia, Pythium, Fusarium, and potentially sometimes botrytis. And one of the most severe diseases that we're faced with now is aphanomyces, and that has been identified throughout Saskatchewan and in some parts of Alberta. And if we're going to go into a wet season this spring, it's going to be very important to be on the lookout for that, because it's actually quite severe during wet conditions and it causes root rot. Then after that, if obviously this is a good example of certified seed, and these are a couple here that are very, very unfortunate situations which do occur from time to time. We're often asked, what is mechanical damage? So mechanical damage can appear or show itself after combining, after cleaning and successive handling. So in the auger, when it's being augered, that type of thing. You've got to be very, very careful with peas. So here we've got the normal. So these are some normal ones, and there aren't very many of them. So this has been damaged excessively, and what happens is it essentially breaks the pea in half, or in this case it's actually broken into several pieces. So the mechanical damage here is extremely severe. So this is not a good candidate for spring seeding. This is really useless. But just to give you an example of some of the things that happen with mechanical damage is that, let's say you had 2 or 3 of these amongst the good germination. If untreated, because damaged seed is a food source for Pythium in the soil, these seeds would leach their sugars and starches, and they become, as I say, a food source for Pythium. So again, always a good idea to treat. And here's an example of one of these tests that's been untreated, and it just shows you, and I'll take the lid off there, that in my opinion, and I'm not a pathologist, looks to me like Ascochyta. And there's a couple of other pathogens on there too. So very important to consider treating. The other thing that we come across quite frequently is damage, so chemical injury, where this has occurred from pre-harvest spraying, either for weed control or dry down or desiccation. We don't necessarily like to say for desiccation, it's more of weed control. But what's happened here is, if we take one of our good examples and we compare it to one of our not so good examples, there's a definite indication that chemical damage is here. So I'm just pulling a few just to show you. So to the untrained eye, this looks normal. And it actually is, but because the secondary roots are fairly firm and they're growing in the way that they are, branching like that, and there's no root hair, this is indicative of chemical injury. So then you dig a little deeper and you see exactly what I'm talking about, branching of the secondary roots and very shortened and thickened primary roots. So this has got chemical injury on it, and this germination, although perhaps in the fall may have been relatively good, potentially around 80, by the time spring comes around for spring seeding, this will have dropped considerably. So chemical damage leads to loss and quick loss, rapid loss of germination.
So when do you recommend giving up on seed versus treating it versus not needing to treat it?
Okay, well, what we want to start with essentially is a good germination. So as I say, 85, we're targeting 80, but most people are looking for 85. If there's no pathogens, I still suggest treating. Now, let's say that this is a good germination and it has a number of different pathogens on it. So there's a threshold, an acceptable industry standard of around 5% for Ascochyta and Anthracnose. Although that doesn't affect the grade, it does affect it economically, and it's important to test and treat for that. Beyond 5% of Ascochyta and Anthracnose, I wouldn't consider using it for seed. And we have formulas which are available actually on 2020's website that discuss different pathogen levels that are acceptable and choose the right treatment for that particular pathogen. And there's lots of good seed treatments out there. So especially going in, as they're saying, to wet soils potentially this year, and maybe not, given in Alberta we have very little snow right now. It's difficult to know what we're actually going to face, but treat and do a vigor test and make sure that there's good quality, vital, strong seedlings.
All right. Thanks for your time, Sarah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.